All right, Wakanda, I'm going to give my review of the Black Panther movie. I went to see the movie yesterday, and it was a really great movie, and I'm going to analyze it on multiple, in multiple ways. One way that I want to just set the precept of is that I think it's important for us to always understand, and this is very important to understand, that at the end of the day, is Hollywood is funding a film about Black people, it's going to be within a certain box as far as how far a film is allowed to go. You're never going to have a white establishment such as Marvel, which is owned by Disney, is my understanding, essentially call for revolution as far as Black people. You're never going to hear them say, hey, we're oppressing you, and so you should probably overthrow us and take back your resources and stop letting us exploit you for your resources. You're never going to hear that inside of a movie. So it's very important to understand that whenever you're watching a movie in Hollywood, you're essentially watching two things going on. You're watching a story that's going on, and you can receive from the story what you want as far as, oh, I enjoy the story, or I do not like the story, or yeah, the story excites me. But on the other hand, you're going to be receiving some political messages. The political messages could be subtle, and no matter how extreme that they are, how overt they are allowed to be, understand that they're never going to be the full story as far as colonialism, as far as racism, and as far as what Black people are going through. They're going to exist inside of a very narrow world. So just saying that first, I'll first say my general feelings about the film. It was a very good film. I personally do not like Marvel movies, but I do like adventure movies. Growing up, my favorite movie was Star Wars. I used to love the adventures and seeing the different planets, and that's kind of similar to how I felt about the movie. It was very nice and inspirational, seeing images of Africa as a non-colonial colonized state. And that is one thing that Lupita Nyong'o said in an interview. She said that essentially this movie imagines what Africa could have been like had it never been colonialized. Obviously, all of Africa has been colonialized and is now suffering from NeoColonialism, which in some ways, in my opinion, can be worse than actual colonialism because it's not as targeted as far as understanding what the source of your oppression is. But this imagines a universe where that never happened. Some other things, I love the sceneries, I love the outfits, I love the storyline, and I love the family, the positive image of a Black family that you got to see in the movie. And that's another thing to applaud, I suppose. And understanding that typically in Hollywood, you're never going to see a good representation of Black people. You're never going to see a representation of Black people where they are in power and they have the power to actually, this Black organization or this Black country had the power to, if they wanted to, completely crush white power. And you'll never see a world where that could exist. You'll never see a world where Black people have the power to be the deciders of good and evil. So that was very inspirational, and I like that could be seen on film. I like that children have their imagination driven by, hey, why does it have to be that white people always have to be the ones who hold the power and make the decisions? Why can't it be that we hold the power and make decisions? I think it drives your imagination and helps you to think outside of what we know as reality and question, why do we live in a world where things are the way that they are and why that they're set up like this? So, those are the positive things I definitely took from the film. Now, let me first say, I realized that a lot of people are viewing this film kind of in a similar way to how Obama was viewed. And what I mean by that is, I remember when Obama was elected as president, you could not say anything negative about him. You could not say anything. You could not provide positive critiquing it. You could not give a positive critique. I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but you could not critique the president. You could not say anything that he's doing wrong. You could not say anything that he's lacking in. You could not call out the fact that he does things for other people but doesn't do the same thing for black people. And the mindset is that because this is the first black president, you can't say certain things about him because we have to hold him up. We have to let him be glorified because this is the last time this could ever happen, and we have to try to make sure this happens again. I always felt like that was bullcrap. What good is a black president if he's not doing anything for the black community? What good is the black president if he's just a symbol? And I've talked about this before, and I'm going to keep talking about it. Black people, we have to get over the love of symbolism. The love of symbolism has allowed us to be in a trance about so many things over the years, while white people are ultimately stripping you from everything that you have, from everything that you are, because you're so in love with the symbol of a black president. You're not thinking about other things that are happening in the world around you that are essentially causing you to be in despair. Similar to that, a lot of people I notice are in love with the symbolism of this movie. And I understand, feeling black pride because, I'm happy that a lot of black people in America are associating themselves with Africa and are understanding the pride that you should have in being of African descent. I can tell you, me personally, I would never want to be anything but of African descent, and I feel like everyone should feel that way. I would never want to be anything other than black, and I feel like everyone should feel that way. So that's another good positive aspect of the movie. But I am going to talk about just a few things that I did catch in the movie, and when I caught them, it didn't destroy the movie for me. Because like I said, I understand that I don't care that this movie's called Black Panther. I don't care that it's an all-black cast. I don't care that, it's the first black superhero being represented on the big screen. I don't care about any of that. It's still owned and created by Marvel. And Marvel, again, is owned by Disney. I don't know who owns Disney, but I'm sure they're big, just as big as anyone. So because of that, and especially because I know these Hollywood corporations, everything is going to be very limited as far as how in-depth it can go into certain things. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the European-based Eurocentric mindset that white life is essentially more important than black life. This is something that is more so subconscious. It's not something that I necessarily expect everyone to have caught, but it's something that I caught, and I think that it is important to recognize because you have to recognize when certain messages are being taught to you as a person who's absorbing information from media. Now, the idea that European lives are more important or white lives are more valuable than black lives, I thought it was very interesting in the movie. So at one point you hear Lupita Nyong'o say, our people are dying all over the continent of Africa. They are dying from diseases. They're dying from wars, all of this. Let's do something. We have enough. Let's help them. And he's essentially, his response is, well, yeah, they're dying and all that stuff, but we have to protect our own civilization. Now, that's fine. But the interesting thing is, right after that, they have the opportunity to save a white man who is a member of the CIA. And the CIA member could essentially expose all of the secrets of Wakanda and could essentially go back to the United States government and say, hey, they got this, they got that, they got this, they got that. And Lupita is like, hey, what are you doing trying to let this white man into our civilization? Like, he could out us to the whole world. And the response of him was, well, what was I supposed to do? Was I supposed to let him die? That's something that you have to understand is a psychological message there. So he didn't have a problem that the other people, the millions of people in Africa were dying because they lacked resources. And he didn't have a problem with that because he was trying to save Wakanda and preserve it. But he did have a problem with it whenever it came to he didn't have a problem with it when it came to this one single white man who he doesn't know that much, but the one white man was dying and he tried to save her life at some point. And so, hey, forget Wakanda. I'll expose all my secrets to you because I just can't let you die. That's one of those things you have to understand is put into movies really because people do have a complex. They really do believe that white lives are more important than black lives. I realized this a while back when I used to watch the news and you would see these stories about explosions or crazy civil wars going on. But whenever there was someone who was European, they felt the need to mention that whenever one of them were killed. So it would be like, oh yeah, 200 people died, and 2 people from the UK as well as 2 Americans also died. Well, what are you saying? I mean, aren't they all people? Are you any more of a person because you're from the UK? Are you any more of a person because you're from Germany? Or are we all people? These are all psychological messages that you're being taught. And so that's one thing that I did pick up from the movie. The other thing is, and this is something that you have to also understand as a psychological message, is the normalizing of black people being passive and not aggressive or on the offensive side. So although I see online a lot of people do more so relate to Killmonger as far as understanding that we should be on the offensive, you do realize that the story paints the picture that the real hero is the one who doesn't want to be offensive against European imperialism, the one who only wants to strike when he is striked. And what he said was, we're not the type, we're not going to go out into the world and try to start stuff. Although my argument is that there's the stuff already started all over the world. Anywhere that can be exploited is being exploited. So there's no us starting something. The war already was waged, and the war has been going on long before any of us. So there's no moral question there as far as are you starting a war or are you reacting to something that's going on globally. But in my observation, what was essentially being said is that this is the ideal African for us, for white supremacy, for us who control the institutions. And the European mindset, a free Africa does not mean that black people will be, number one, waging war on European powers, but number 2, even in a position to wage war on European powers. Number 3, even want to wage war on European powers, even when the war has already been waged on them. This is the ideal mindset to continue the exploitation, to continue the colonialism, to continue the system and allow it to exist in the context that it has existed in. And so that's another thing that I did pick up. It feels like a lot of the movie was kind of glorifying this Mandela / Martin Luther King-like character. And when Killmonger came out and said, listen, I'm a part of those people around the world who's being exploited by, and really we know that the true definition of what he was talking about is white supremacy. He's dealing with it in America. People deal with it in the Caribbean. People deal with it in Latin America. These are all people who are victims of a white supremacist system. So we're victims of this. Why are you not doing anything? You have military technology. Don't think that just because the United States has not officially declared war on black people that there's not actually a war going on black people. There is a war going on, regardless of if not they have declared it. And it's not just, it doesn't just manifest itself in violence. It doesn't just manifest itself whenever a black man is killed by the police. It manifests itself in poverty. It manifests itself with miseducation. It manifests itself with environmental issues, environmental having black people live inside of environments that are contaminated with lead, contaminated with chemicals, having black people eating foods that ultimately kill them. This is all a war being waged, a war that essentially is based off of colonialism. So the war's already been waged is what I'm saying. And the idea that the good African is the one who says, well, we're not going to use violence against anyone. We're just going to, and not unless they come against us, we're just going to, take care of ourselves and, do what's right by our people. But really, the more contemplative figure is the one who says what Malcolm X says. It's not that violence is first. It's not that violence is always necessary, but it's any means necessary. Any means that we can get our people to be out of this condition that they're in, we are going to do. They don't like hearing those things. They like hearing that, well, we're not going to do this, that, and a third, but we'll just do this. And so that's always normalized to us, the idea that you can go out there on the offensive, on the defensive and say, well, we're going to fight back, but we're not going to fight back this way, that way, or this way. But really, if you're on the defense, why does the offense, why does the one doing the oppression get to decide what methods you choose as far as fighting back? So that's another thing I noticed in the movie. Another side note more so is that it's interesting that colonialism was addressed indirectly, but there was not really a strong addressing of colonialism. And I think that that's kind of disingenuous to me because, and not just addressing colonialism, but of neocolonialism. It was kind of implied that Africa outside of Wakanda was in the state that it was in because it had been, unlike them, they had lost a lot of their resources. But it's important to directly address that. Africa did not one day become poor. Africa became poor because of European powers going into Africa and taking everything that they could and bring it back to their country. Not only that, they never stopped. While it's not, they're not colonies per se. This is neocolonialism. So there are NGOs and corporations that are set up basically doing the same thing. There are politicians who have been placed in power by European powers who are essentially doing things inside of the government that are favorable to those European powers to the detriment of their own people. So you have their people being exploited so that they can maintain the same system of exploitation, and the European powers can pretend as though they don't have anything to do with it because, hey, well, we're not colonizing them, or we're not telling them they have to do this. They're doing it voluntarily. So it's very important to address that, I think. Even if it was not necessarily an extended conversation, but just the direct calling out of what it was. It's just, Africa's poor. Well, why? How did it get that way? Let's talk about it. Even if it's just for one scene or just one thing that we say. Let's talk about the fact that this is not just something that happened in the past. It's something that's still going on. Another side note. I this is something I didn't really like that. Helping Africa was basically, or helping African people around the world is basically framed in a way that you do so by doing charity. Well, okay, you give those people money, you give them charity. Are you dealing with the causes of their condition? Wakanda was completely equipped and able to do that if they wanted to address the problems of the condition. So why only limit it to handouts? And this is a very European way of addressing the issues without actually addressing the issues. If you really learn about foreign aid, you learn that foreign aid is essentially something that's given to essentially say, okay, well, we did our part, and that's really what we're limited in doing, and we can't do anything further. Despite the fact that these same countries that are giving foreign aid are taking estimated 9 times more out of the same countries that they are giving foreign aid to. So that was just another side note. I felt like the idea that charity or just, building a community center is a way to make everything right. No, it's not. You have to deal with the economic implications of being a a second-class citizen in America. The fact that there is no economy, now that would have been more interesting if they had like a Marcus Garvey thing going on. Okay, all Africans go back to Africa. All right, we're gonna go and establish, or we're gonna go and build Africa up, not just Wakanda, but other places outside of Africa. That would have been interesting, but that would have been if I wrote the movie, and I didn't write the movie. So let's not get too much into that. I thought it was interesting that, I thought it was interesting their choice of a villain. First it seemed like it was going to be this white man, but then it turned out to be African American. I thought that was very interesting because I was thinking that before watching the movie, who are they going to choose to be the villain? Now, it would be very deep if they really made it the true villain of African people, which is people who are exploiting African people. Instead, they chose to do a black villain. And it's interesting because, well, if they have a sequel, are they going to always have to choose a black villain? Are they ever going to have a white villain? Are they ever going to be true and honest to the true issues of black people, not being internal, but being external? So, I think those are my only thoughts. Overall, again, I really did like the movie, but I think it's important to think with two minds. You can like a movie and still analyze it, and honestly, you should, 100%. And I learned this a long time ago. One of my favorite movies used to be, and it's going to sound horrible, because I can't watch the movie now because it disturbs me so deeply, but one of my favorite movies used to be Gone with the Wind. I love that movie. I've seen it so many times. I watched it over and over since I was a kid. I just thought this movie was amazing. Then I kind of became more self-aware, and I went to college, and I learned about stereotypes. I learned about white supremacy, and I came back and watched this movie that I used to love and watch all the time, and I couldn't stomach it. Because I understood that regardless of whether or not you like the storyline, at the same time, our mind is also soaking in these psychological implications that might not be explicit, although a lot of them were explicit in that movie. But even though they might not be explicit, they're very much implicit. And the fact that it's not explicit does not mean that those things are not going to be soaked into your mind. So hopefully this, I guess it's a review in some ways, did not ruin the movie for anyone. I know a lot of people don't like thinking about certain things being deeper than what they're presented to be, but I'm always going to think deeper because that's kind of how I'm wired. If you ever see me watching a movie, it's very hard for me to watch movies and just not think about the psychological messaging, especially whenever black people are in a movie. And usually whenever we're in a movie, we have a very limited role to portray ourselves a certain way, and then that's basically it. And I'm always looking at stuff like that. I can't help it. Like, I can't turn it off. Some people can't turn it off. I haven't learned to, and I don't think it's good to turn it off. I think you always have to be aware of secret messaging put into our minds by white supremacy. So that is all. I hope you enjoyed the movie, and